They say grief is the price we pay for love. But what's the price for being lied to for 30 years? My name is Margaret Rose Sullivan. I am 68 years old, and I am a widow, or at least that's what I thought I was. Until I attended my husband's funeral and discovered he was attending too. Let me start at the beginning. Not the beginning of his death, the beginning of our life together. I met Thomas Sullivan in 1976. I was 21 years old, working as a waitress at a diner in Portland, Oregon. He was 25, a graduate student at Portland State studying civil engineering. He came in every Thursday night at exactly 7:15 p.m. Always ordered the same thing: meatloaf, mashed potatoes, coffee with 2 sugars. He'd sit at the counter, spread his textbooks out, and study while he ate. For 3 months, I refilled his coffee and watched him work. And for 3 months, he never said more than thank you and good night. But on the 14th Thursday, it was raining. A proper Oregon rain, the kind that soaks through your coat and into your bones. Thomas came in drenched. His textbooks were ruined, pages warped and ink bleeding. He looked at those books like someone had killed his dog. And before I could think about it, I said, "Don't worry. I have all those books at home. You can borrow mine." He looked up at me, really looked at me for the first time in 3 months, and he smiled. Not a polite smile, a real one. "You have advanced fluid dynamics textbooks at home?" he asked. "I'm taking night classes," I said. "Same program. 2 years behind you." That was the night everything changed. We got married 18 months later. A small ceremony at the courthouse. My mother cried. His parents didn't come. They thought he was marrying beneath him. A waitress with community college credits wasn't good enough for their son. But Thomas said he didn't care. He said I was all he needed. We built a life together. Thomas got a job at an engineering firm in Seattle. We moved to a small house in Ballard. I finished my degree. Got a job as a civil engineer too. We were partners. In work. In life. In everything. We had 2 children. Daniel, born in 1982. Sarah, born in 1985. Beautiful children. Smart children. Children who had their father's green eyes and my stubborn chin. Thomas was a good father. At least I thought he was. He coached Daniel's little league team. He taught Sarah how to ride a bike. He never missed a school play or a parent-teacher conference. He was there. Always there. Except when he wasn't. It started small. Business trips. The firm was expanding, he said. Projects in California. In Arizona. In Nevada. He'd be gone for a week. Then 2 weeks. Then a month. But he always came back. Always with gifts for the kids. Always with stories about the projects. The bridges he was designing. The buildings going up. The challenges he was solving. And I believed him. Because why wouldn't I? He was my husband. The father of my children. The man I'd built my entire life around. The trips got longer. By the time the kids were in high school, Thomas was gone more than he was home. But the money was good. The bank account grew. We paid off the house. Put the kids through college. Built a retirement fund. I told myself it was worth it. That we were building something. That someday when Thomas retired we'd have time. We'd travel. We'd finally have the life we'd always talked about. And then 3 months ago I got the call. It was a Thursday. Ironic, isn't it? Thursdays used to be our day. The day he came to the diner. The day everything started. A detective from Phoenix, Arizona called me at 4:30 in the afternoon. "Mrs. Sullivan," he said. "I'm calling about your husband, Thomas Sullivan." My stomach dropped. I knew. Before he said another word, I knew. "There's been an accident," the detective continued. "A car accident on Interstate 10. I'm sorry to inform you that your husband didn't survive." The world stopped. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there holding the phone, staring at the kitchen counter where Thomas had eaten breakfast 3 weeks earlier before leaving for what would be his last trip. "Are you sure it's him?" I asked. "Yes, ma'am. He had his driver's license on him. His work ID. We contacted his employer to confirm." "I need to see him," I said. There was a pause. A long pause. "Mrs. Sullivan," the detective said carefully. The accident was severe. The body was badly burned. Dental records confirmed the identification, but I don't think viewing would be advisable. Something in his voice made my skin prickle. Not quite sympathy. Something else. Something that felt like discomfort. I'm coming to Phoenix, I said. I need to handle the arrangements. Of course, he said. But Mrs. Sullivan, there's something you should know. The funeral has already been arranged. What? I said. By whom? Another pause. Longer this time. By his wife. His wife. I am his wife. I think there's been a mistake, I said, my voice shaking. I'm Margaret Sullivan, Thomas Sullivan's wife. We've been married for 47 years. The detective cleared his throat. Ma'am, I think you should come to Phoenix. There are some things we need to discuss in person. I flew to Phoenix the next morning. Daniel came with me. Sarah couldn't get time off work, but she wanted to come. Both of them were destroyed. Their father was dead. Their hero. The man who taught them everything. I didn't tell them what the detective had said. Not yet, because I didn't believe it myself. We met Detective Rodriguez at the Phoenix Police Department. He was a kind man, mid-50s, tired eyes, the kind of eyes that have seen too much and don't want to hurt anyone anymore. He sat us down in a conference room. He put a file folder on the table between us. Mrs. Sullivan, he said gently, what I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear. Just tell me, I said. He opened the folder. Inside were photographs, documents, papers. Your husband, he began, has been living in Phoenix for the past 15 years. He owns a house in Scottsdale. He has a wife. Her name is Linda Sullivan. They have 3 children together. The room tilted. Daniel grabbed my hand. That's not possible, he said. My father was a civil engineer. He traveled for work. He was with us in Seattle. He was, Detective Rodriguez said, but he was also here. He has 2 separate lives, 2 families, 2 complete identities. He slid a photograph across the table. It was Thomas, standing in front of a beautiful house, his arm around a woman, blonde, younger than me, maybe 50, and 3 children, teenagers, all with Thomas's green eyes. I stared at that photo until my vision blurred. How? I whispered. We're still piecing it together, the detective said. But from what we can tell, he's been maintaining 2 separate households for 15 years. He told the Phoenix family he was a civil engineer who traveled for work to Seattle. He told you he traveled for work to Phoenix. He split his time. 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there. The funeral, I said. You said she arranged a funeral. Detective Rodriguez nodded. It's tomorrow, at Our Lady of Guadalupe Church in Scottsdale. The Phoenix family has no idea you exist. Daniel made a sound. Not quite a sob. Not quite a scream. Something in between. I looked at my son, my beautiful boy, who looked just like his father, who had just discovered that everything he knew about his father was a lie. I want to go to that funeral, I said. Detective Rodriguez looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Sullivan, I don't think that's a good idea. This is going to be a shock to the Phoenix family. They're grieving. Finding out about you might. I don't care, I said, and my voice was steel. My husband died. I'm going to his funeral. The funeral was at 2 p.m. on Saturday. Daniel and I arrived at 1:45. The church was beautiful. White stucco with a red tile roof. Desert landscaping. Saguaro cacti standing like sentries. There were at least 200 people there. I didn't recognize a single one. These were Thomas's friends, his colleagues, his community, a whole life I knew nothing about. We sat in the back. Daniel was shaking. I held his hand. I was numb, beyond grief, beyond anger, just empty. The service began. A priest spoke about eternal life, about love, about family. Then she walked up to the podium. Linda, the other wife. She was beautiful. Even in grief, she was beautiful. She wore a black dress that probably cost more than my car. Diamond earrings. Perfect hair. Perfect makeup. She looked like the kind of woman Thomas's parents would have approved of. Thomas was the love of my life, she began, her voice breaking. We met 20 years ago at a charity gala in Phoenix. He asked me to dance, and I just knew he was the one. 20 years ago. We'd been married for 42 years when they met. Linda continued. He was the most dedicated husband, the most loving father. He worked so hard to provide for us. All those business trips to Seattle, all that time away from home. He did it all for us. I felt something break inside me. Not my heart. That had already broken. Something deeper. Something fundamental. One of the teenagers stood up. A boy, maybe 17. Thomas's nose. My stubborn chin. My dad, he said, his voice thick with tears, taught me how to throw a football, how to change a tire, how to be a man. He never missed a game, never forgot a birthday. He was always there for us. Daniel's hand tightened on mine. That's what Dad told us, he whispered. The same stories, the same memories. He gave them the same childhood he gave us. He had cloned his life, duplicated it, given two families the exact same father. The priest invited people to come forward and say their final goodbyes to the casket. Linda went first. She laid a single red rose on the polished wood. The three children followed. More roses. More tears. And then I stood up. Daniel grabbed my arm. Mom, what are you doing? What I should have done 47 years ago, I said. Finding out who I really married. I walked down the aisle. Every eye in the church turned to me. Whispers started. Who is she? Does anyone know her? I reached the casket. I stood next to Linda. She looked at me confused. I'm sorry, she said politely. Did you know Thomas? Yes, I said. I'm his wife. The church went silent. Linda laughed. A nervous laugh. I'm sorry, what? I'm Margaret Sullivan, I said clearly so everyone could hear. Thomas Sullivan's wife. We've been married for 47 years. We have 2 children, Daniel and Sarah. And I had no idea you existed until 3 days ago. Linda's face went white, then red, then white again. That's not possible, she said. You're lying. You're some crazy woman trying to. I pulled out my wallet, showed her my driver's license, Margaret Rose Sullivan, then my marriage certificate, dated 1978, then photos, Thomas and me on our wedding day, Thomas holding baby Daniel, Thomas teaching Sarah to ride a bike, the same photos she probably had in her house, different children, same moments. Linda staggered. One of the teenagers, a girl, ran forward. Mom, what is she talking about? Your father, I said, looking at all of them, lived 2 lives. He had 2 families, 2 complete separate existences, and he gave each of us the exact same lies. The priest stepped forward. Perhaps we should take this outside. No, I said. Everyone here should know the truth. Thomas Sullivan was not the man any of us thought he was. I turned to the casket, and I said something I'd been holding back for 3 days. I loved you. For 47 years, I loved you with everything I had. I built my life around you. I believed every word you said. And you gave me nothing but lies. Then I turned and walked out of that church. Daniel followed me. And behind us, I heard Linda collapse into sobs. We drove back to the hotel in silence. Neither of us had words for what had just happened. But when we got to the room, Daniel turned to me and said, "We need to find out how deep this goes." And he was right. We hired a private investigator, a woman named Andrea Chun, 45 years old, former FBI. She'd seen everything, or so she thought. It took her 2 weeks to put together the full picture. Thomas Sullivan had not 2 lives. He had 3. 3. The third family was in Boulder, Colorado. A woman named Patricia, married for 12 years. 2 children. Another perfect suburban life. Thomas had been rotating between 3 families for over a decade. Seattle, Phoenix, Boulder. Like he was traveling for work. Which, in a way, he was. His work was being 3 different husbands, 3 different fathers. Andrea brought us the financial records, and that's when we understood the scope. Thomas had been systematically draining all 3 families for years. The business trips weren't just about maintaining his lies. They were about money laundering, tax fraud, embezzlement. He'd taken out life insurance policies on himself with all 3 families as beneficiaries. He'd opened credit cards in all 3 families' names. He'd mortgaged all 3 houses without any of us knowing. And then he'd faked his own death. Except he hadn't. The body in that casket wasn't Thomas. Andrea found him 2 months after the funeral. Alive. Living in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, under the name Robert Morrison. He was living with the life insurance money, all 3 policies, for $1 million, plus everything he'd embezzled, another $2 million. He'd left all 3 families penniless, grieving, destroyed, while he sipped margaritas on the beach. I sat in Andrea's office, looking at the photographs of Thomas Robert smiling on a yacht. "What do you want to do?" Andrea asked. I thought about it for a long moment. "I want to give him exactly what he gave us," I said. "I want him to lose everything." We didn't call the police immediately. We planned. First, I contacted Linda. She didn't want to talk to me, but when I told her Thomas was alive, she listened. Then I contacted Patricia in Boulder. She was the easiest to convince. She'd already been investigating Thomas's finances and had found discrepancies. 3 wives, all betrayed, all furious, all ready for revenge. We pooled our resources, hired the same lawyer, a woman named Catherine Park. She specialized in complex fraud cases. And then we filed charges, not just with the local police, with the FBI. Insurance fraud across state lines is a federal crime. So is identity theft. So is tax evasion. So is everything Thomas had been doing for 15 years. The FBI arrested him on a Tuesday morning. He was having breakfast at a beachside cafe. Eggs Benedict. Mimosa. Not a care in the world. Until 6 federal agents surrounded his table and put him in handcuffs. They extradited him back to the United States. He was charged with 23 counts of fraud, 8 counts of identity theft, 12 counts of tax evasion. The trial lasted 4 months. All 3 families attended. Linda, Patricia, me. We sat together, in the front row, united. The man who tried to divide us had actually brought us together. Thomas looked at us once, just once, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. The jury found him guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 35 years in federal prison. Thomas will be 103 years old when he gets out, if he lives that long. But that's not the end of the story, because we got our money back. All of it. The insurance companies had to pay out. Thomas was legally dead for 6 months. The policies were valid. And when he was found alive, the fraud was proven. But we'd already been paid. For $1 million. Plus the $2 million he'd embezzled. Plus penalties. Plus damages. The court ordered the money split 3 ways. Linda got $2 million. Patricia got $2 million. I got $2 million. But we did something Thomas never expected. We pooled it. The 3 of us created a foundation, the Sullivan Survivors Fund. We help women who've been defrauded by their spouses. We help families recover from financial abuse. We help people rebuild their lives after betrayal. We turned his evil into something good. Linda and I have coffee once a month now. Patricia flies in from Boulder every few months. Our children know each other. Half siblings, united by DNA and trauma. We are a family now. Not the family Thomas created, but a real family, built on truth instead of lies. I'm 68 years old. I'm a widow. Or maybe I'm not. I'm not sure what you call a woman whose husband faked his death and had 2 other families. But I know what I'm not. I'm not a victim. Not anymore. Because Thomas Sullivan tried to bury 3 families. And instead we buried him. My name is Margaret Rose Sullivan, and I survived the man I loved. And that is the greatest revenge of all. They say you can't take it with you when you die, but you can decide who gets it, and more importantly, who doesn't. My name is Catherine Whitfield. I am 82 years old, and I am the wealthiest woman in Charleston, South Carolina. Or at least I was, until I decided to find out who my children really were. I built my fortune the old-fashioned way. I married it. I know what you're thinking. Gold digger. Trophy wife. One of those women. But you'd be wrong. I married Harrison Whitfield in 1963. I was 21 years old. He was 45. People talked. They said I was after his money. They said he was having a midlife crisis. What they didn't know was that I didn't need his money. I had my own. My father owned a textile mill in North Carolina. When he died, he left everything to me. $3 million. In 1962, that was a fortune. Harrison and I met at a charity gala. He was a widower. His first wife had died of cancer 2 years earlier. He had 3 children from that marriage. All adults. All living their own lives. We talked all night. About books. About art. About business. He didn't talk to me like I was a pretty young thing. He talked to me like I was his equal. And I fell in love with him. Not his money. Him. We were married for 42 years. We built the Whitfield Foundation together. We endowed hospitals, universities, museums. We turned his shipping fortune and my textile inheritance into something that mattered. We never had children together. I couldn't. A childhood illness had made it impossible. But I tried to be a good stepmother to Harrison's 3 children, Richard, Elizabeth, and Thomas. They hated me from the moment they met me. To them, I was the woman who replaced their mother, the interloper, the gold digger. It didn't matter that their mother had been dead for 2 years. It didn't matter that Harrison was lonely. I was the villain in their story. For 42 years, I tried to win them over. Birthday gifts, holiday invitations, offers to help with their careers, their children, their lives. For 42 years, they took everything I offered and gave me nothing but cold politeness in return. Harrison died 5 years ago, peacefully, in his sleep, at 92 years old. At the funeral, Richard gave a eulogy. He talked about his father's brilliance, his generosity, his legacy. He mentioned me once as father's companion in his later years. Companion. Like I was a nurse he'd hired. After the service, Elizabeth came up to me. She was 65 years old, perfectly dressed in black Chanel, diamond earrings, gold necklace, all gifts from Harrison over the years. "Catherine," she said, her voice cold and formal, "we'll need to meet with the lawyers next week to discuss father's estate." "Of course," I said. "I'm sure you understand," she continued, "that father's assets should rightfully go to his children, his blood. You've had a comfortable life. You'll be fine." She walked away before I could respond, like my opinion didn't matter, like I was already dismissed. The will reading was on a Tuesday. Harrison's lawyer, Edward Morrison, sat at the head of the conference table. I sat on one side. Richard, Elizabeth, and Thomas sat on the other. Felt like I was on trial. Edward opened the file. He cleared his throat, and he began to read. "I, Harrison James Whitfield, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." The room was silent. Richard sat forward, pen in hand, ready to take notes. "To my children Richard, Elizabeth, and Thomas, I leave my love and my gratitude for the years we shared." Edward paused. I saw Richard's face change, from expectation to confusion. "All of my financial assets, properties, and holdings are to be placed in the Whitfield Family Trust, to be managed solely by my wife, Catherine Ann Whitfield, for the remainder of her life." The room erupted. "What?" Elizabeth shrieked. "That's not possible." Thomas stood up so fast his chair fell over. "She manipulated him. He was senile. This will is invalid." Richard just stared at me, and in his eyes I saw pure hatred. Edward continued reading, his voice steady despite the chaos. Upon Catherine's death, the trust will be dissolved and the assets distributed according to her wishes. She will have sole discretion over who inherits and in what amounts. In other words, Harrison had left everything to me, and I would decide if his children got anything at all. Elizabeth turned to me. Her face was red, tears of rage streaming down her cheeks. You poisoned his mind against us. You spent 40 years turning him against his own children. I didn't respond. I just sat there, watching them reveal who they really were. They tried to fight it. They hired lawyers. They challenged Harrison's mental competency. They claimed I had exerted undue influence. Took 2 years. But every challenge was thrown out. Harrison had been perfectly sound when he made that will. And he'd made it very, very clear what he wanted. During those 2 years, I made a decision. I would give them one final chance. I invited all 3 of them to dinner at the family estate. The house where Harrison and I had lived for 4 decades. The house they'd grown up in. They came. Of course they came. They wanted their inheritance. We sat in the formal dining room, the same table where Harrison and I had hosted Thanksgiving dinners. The same table where I tried to bond with these people for 42 years. I want to make you an offer, I said after the meal was served. Richard set down his fork. We're listening. Your father left me everything because he wanted me to determine who deserves to inherit his legacy. So I'm going to test you. Test us, Elizabeth said, her voice dripping with contempt. We're his children. We don't need to prove anything. That's exactly the attitude that worried your father, I said quietly. Thomas leaned forward. What kind of test? A simple one, I said. I'm going to give each of you $10,000. Right now. Cash. I want you to use it to do something good. Something that matters. In 6 months, come back and tell me what you did with it. That's it, Richard said. Use $10,000 to do good? That's it, I confirmed. And based on what you choose to do, I'll decide how to distribute your father's estate. They looked at each other, uncertain, but they agreed. They had no idea I was going to have them followed. I hired 3 private investigators, 1 for each child. I wanted to know exactly what they would do when they thought no one was watching. 6 months later, they returned. We sat in the same dining room. Richard, I said, tell me what you did with the money. Richard smiled, the smile of someone who thinks they've won. I donated it to the Charleston Children's Hospital. In Father's name. They're putting a plaque in the lobby. Interesting, I said. And did you happen to mention to the hospital board that you're hoping to be elected chairman next year? Richard's smile faltered. Did you mention that being a major donor would essentially guarantee your election? And that the chairman position comes with a 6-figure salary? Richard's face went red. That's not why I... Yes, it is, I said. You invested $10,000 to make $200,000 per year. That's not charity, Richard. That's business. I turned to Elizabeth. Your turn. Elizabeth sat up straighter. I used the money to fund a scholarship at Vassar, my alma mater, for young women pursuing degrees in literature, just like I did. How noble, I said. And did you tell them the scholarship was in honor of your daughter? Elizabeth blinked. Yes, Emily. She graduated from Vassar last year. And did you mention that you're hoping this scholarship will improve Emily's chances of being accepted to Vassar's graduate program? The program she was rejected from last spring. Elizabeth's mouth opened, then closed. She had no defense. I looked at Thomas, the youngest, the one I'd hoped might surprise me. Thomas, I said. Thomas looked uncomfortable. I started a nonprofit to help homeless veterans in Charleston. The money went to rent for a small office and initial supplies. That's very kind, I said. And how many veterans have you helped so far? Thomas shifted in his seat. We're still in the planning stages. Planning stages, I repeated. For 6 months. Tell her the truth, Thomas, Richard snapped. Tell her you spent the money on office furniture and a fancy website and haven't helped a single person. Thomas looked down at his hands. Caught. I stood up. Your father gave you everything. Private schools, college, business connections, trust funds. And you took it all as if you deserved it simply for being born. When I gave you $10,000 and asked you to do something good, you couldn't do it. Not without calculating how it would benefit you. Richard used it to buy power. Elizabeth used it to buy influence for her daughter. Thomas used it to buy the appearance of charity without doing any actual work. You failed. All three of you. Elizabeth stood up, trembling with rage. You had no right to test us. That money is ours. Our father's money. Your father knew exactly what you were, I said quietly. That's why he left everything to me. Richard stood too. You're not going to give us anything, are you? No, I said. I'm not. Instead, I'm going to do what your father and I always planned. I'm going to give it all away. Over the next year, I liquidated the entire Whitfield estate. Every property, every investment, every asset, $340 million. And I donated every penny to the Charleston Children's Hospital, but not in Richard's name, in the name of the children who can't afford treatment, to Vassar College, but not as a scholarship in Emily's honor, as a fund for first-generation students who would never otherwise afford to go, to homeless veterans, but not to Thomas's fake nonprofit, to existing programs that have been doing the work for decades. I gave it to people who needed it, not to people who felt entitled to it. Richard, Elizabeth, and Thomas tried to sue me. Again, they claimed I had a fiduciary duty to preserve the estate for the family. The judge threw the case out. Harrison's will was clear. The money was mine to do with as I pleased. I kept one thing, the family estate, the house where Harrison and I lived, and I left it to someone in my will. Not Richard, not Elizabeth, not Thomas. I left it to Maria, the housekeeper who had worked for us for 30 years. The woman who treated me with more kindness than Harrison's children ever did. I'm 82 years old now. I don't have much time left. But I know that when I die, Harrison's fortune will have done exactly what he wanted. It will have helped people who actually needed help. And his children, they'll inherit exactly what they deserve. Nothing. My name is Catherine Whitfield, and I gave away $340 million just to prove a point. Some legacies are built with money. Others are built with character. And character is the one thing you can't buy.